Hi, good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. Thanks for letting me speak tonight. My name is Chris Jacks. I'm a Naperville resident, and I'm also a candidate for the Naperville Park District Board of Commissioners in the upcoming election. I'm here to speak tonight about this mailer handout that was distributed to Naperville residents, my concerns about it, and get on the record about some things. So let me describe this. This is some sort of a block piece mailer, was handed out. I've heard to tens of thousands of voters in Naperville. It has a picture of 3 people on there that I don't think are Naperville residents, and it talks about they'll decide what books you and your kids can read. And it mentions that there's a group called Naperville Forward that appears that says sent this. So my concerns about this, number one, is that it has an appropriated version of the Naperville logo on it, like you see right behind there. I think people could see that and think this came from the city, which obviously it didn't. Another concern is if you look in the State Board of Elections, the group Naperville Forward, the chairman of that is Teresa Sullivan, their city councilwoman, and I'm concerned about that. Another thing is if you look, there's names listed on here for the various roles in the upcoming election for the mayor, for city council members, park district commissioners. At least one candidate's told me that he never gave permission to have his name used on this, and we think there's other people in that same category too. And then finally, my concern is that some of the claims made in this mailer I think are outrageous. It says on here, it talks about candidates running for park district boards hope to advance a fanatical agenda, and also talks about challenge and droves by self-appointed book police, and removing scores of classics from schools and library shelves. And I want to state for the record that I don't favor any of that. I'm not sure even out in the park district I can even do any of that. And I know the other candidates running for these positions for mayor, city council, and I can say none of them favor that either, any kind of fanatical agenda. So I'm concerned about that as well. So to summarize, this mailer was sent out. I think it has the Naperville logo. It can confuse people. I know at least one person did not give their permission to have this sent out with their name. And then the last thing is that I question if this is appropriate for anybody in city council to be involved with, especially all the talk about ethics we've had here in the last 4 years. I'm really very concerned about that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, several months ago, our city council passed an code of ethics on this dais. It was a unanimous decision by the council. And the reason that we took that up and had it drawn up and ultimately voted on it was because we had a few members of boards and commissions who, in our view, were saying things on social media and out in the public that were inappropriate and reflected poorly on our city. And so we took that upon ourselves to set some standards to make sure that we had guidelines for all of our boards and commission members, as well as the city council, to follow so that we never put the city in an awkward situation or in a bad light. In my view, the mailer that has been talked about here was inappropriate. It's dirty politics. It was done by a member of our city council. It's a bad reflection on all of us. It's a bad reflection on our city. It doesn't belong in Naperville or any local election. And it's very unfortunate. Now, as mayor, I'm also the parliamentarian of our dais. And so it's my duty to enforce rules and ordinances. And so here I am. I've always tried to be fair and consistent on the dais with everybody, and I'll continue that. But as I said, we now have a cloud over the dais because of this. Councilwoman Sullivan, and I know that this is your PAC, and you certainly have every right as a citizen to do that, but as an elected official, you agreed not to take these types of positions. And so it's troubling, but that's done. Now we only have a couple of meetings left, and so I'll be done. Councilwoman Sullivan will be done as well. And our terms will end, and new elected officials will take our positions. So it would be unproductive and actually moot for me to pursue the only tool that we have on the dais when this type of situation occurs, and that is a censure. But for the record, I'd like the minutes to reflect that as the mayor and the parliamentarian, is my belief that this was an item that should have been censured. It should not have been done. It's below the standards that we set for ourselves, and I'm very, very sorry that it happened. I'm sorry to the city, I'm sorry to all of you, and I'm sorry to the dais. It's something that I think makes us all look bad. Okay, maybe it's a couple years ago now at this point, we as a council passed a campaign finance reform ordinance. This ordinance was what was used tonight with Councilman Benny White. Thank you for disclosing the campaign contribution. I think that that was the right thing to do, and I think that that was the intent of the ordinance, was to promote transparency. I voted against this ordinance because I believe it puts a chill on local donations, because some people don't feel comfortable with having to be called out on votes if they support a candidate. I think it gives an advantage to one party over another party, and I think that that's unethical. Illinois, on a statewide basis, the Democrats outraised the Republicans about 9-1. It's a pretty substantial difference. So if the local people are unable to compete with that, or unwilling to because of an ordinance, then what will happen is outside money, union money, PAC money, state party money will become more and more involved in our local politics, which we are now seeing. I don't think it's right to give a party an unfair influence. I think tonight what we saw was, well, let me give you a quick story back a couple years ago. Before this ordinance, my campaign received a $5,000 check from Comcast. Councilwoman Sullivan called me because 2 weeks later on our agenda was a renewal of an agreement with Comcast. And she's like, "Are you going to vote on this?" And I'm like, "Nope." I said, "The optics are horrible," right? And this was before the ordinance. I'll recuse myself. I didn't vote on it. It was too close, right? It was like literally within a couple of weeks from receiving the check to having the agenda item. I thought that if there was anything good about this ordinance, that it would at least close that gap and require council members to disclose it, not voluntarily like Councilman White just did, but by ordinance, okay? Now, Mr. DeSanto just has indicated that that is not the case, you don't believe, right? You believe that it's not required in this ordinance, right?
Well, I mean, the ordinance is detailed. It talks about relevant campaign contributions and interested entities, and it defines interested entities as entities which are making a public statement to the council. So whether it's a written statement or support or oppose or a verbal statement, and so it's whether that interested entity has made a relevant campaign contribution.
Well, then I think we have a conflict again tonight, both in transparency and in our ordinance, because while Councilman White disclosed it, Councilman Sullivan did not disclose it. And we had the same situation. Union money went into the PAC, a PAC that you control, and it was not disclosed before a vote. And I guess I'm curious what this ordinance is for. If it doesn't solve for that problem, what is it for? And to me, it was an unethical ordinance to begin with. And now I'm learning, or I'm finding, that it's also an ineffective ordinance, at least for what its purpose was, which was to improve transparency. So, on my own authority, I am going to direct our city manager to bring this back at our next council meeting to rescind that ordinance. And we'll let everybody have another vote at it, because this has turned out exactly like I said it was going to turn out, where outside money has come into our local elections to influence our local elections. And that is not good for Naperville. Councilwoman Sullivan.